name's Jenna Plummer, and I'm the owner of Little Seed Counseling. We are bringing you this series called The Least Wonderful Time of the Year in order to help support folks in the community who are struggling as the days get darker and shorter. Today, we're going to look at three different things. First and foremost, what is self-care versus self-soothing? The unique differences between the two and how they overlap. Next, we're going to look at grounding techniques, how we can help ourselves get in our body instead of being up in our heads so much. And the third thing is creating a soothing station. So you may call this different things, soothing station, box, whatever it is. We're going to teach you how to make one and some of the components to include. Just to introduce myself as your host here today, my name is Jenna Plummer. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor, a licensed clinical addiction specialist, and a clinical certified trauma specialist specializing in working with individuals. My specialties include working with addiction, trauma, dysfunctional family systems, and complex trauma. If at any point after this presentation you need to contact me, my email address is listed here, as well as our website. What's most important to me is that you get some information about how to take care of yourself, especially during a season where that's really difficult. So why are we doing all of this? So remember, this is part one of a 4-part series, all aimed to help us navigate the holiday season. For so many of us, whether it be dealing with anxiety and depression, managing grief, managing visits with difficult friends and family, learning how to exist in a world full of parties as a sober person, all of these are great reasons for us to get some extra support around November and December. We want to provide some education and skills for you to deal with whatever comes your way, and to also offer some support and solidarity as we move our way through the season. I think just the acknowledgement that this season is tough is enough for people to recognize that they're not alone. When we talk about self-care, we often talk about things like bubble baths and yoga and deep breathing, and all of those things are wonderful. Self-care is really made up of all of those day-to-day things that you do to take care of yourself. So anywhere from hygiene, brushing your teeth, washing your face, to kind of spiritual maintenance, right? So prayer and meditation for some. This may look like journaling. These are all things we really need to do to keep our engine running. So to use a similar metaphor, I look at this as doing the things we need to do to maintain a vehicle. So this isn't a quick fix or a magic solution in the midst of an accident or emergency, but if we maintain our vehicle, things like putting gas in it, washing it so it doesn't have any external wear and tear, taking it in to be serviced, oil changes, tires, things like that. All of the things I know I don't want to do, but I definitely have to do in order to keep up my vehicle. These things are really helpful in helping us avoid these unnecessary situations or crises, right? Like, I know if I take a minute to put gas in my car, that my car's not going to run out of gas on the highway unless there's an emergency situation going on. So that's what I think about with self-care. It's all of those things we do just to keep things going. And what we're talking about in this presentation really comes down to self-soothing versus self-care. So self-soothing is a form of self-care. It's something that we do to take care of ourselves on a psychological level, but it is its own component. It helps us manage situations that we didn't expect, or situations that we may have expected but are still really difficult to deal with. So I think about this being, in the analogy we used before, like your AAA or your roadside assistance companies, your tow trucks. We may pay for them and not always use them, but they're there just in case. One of the things I want to point out is the brain here. And what we know about the brain is there's this little piece called the amygdala. And I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see me do this, but circling where the amygdala is. So in that picture of the brain, it's a little bit of the way up, right above that brainstem. And the amygdala is a beautiful part of our brain system because it tells us when something is scary, dangerous, or wrong. So it's our alert system, and it goes off whenever it feels threatened. So in present day, when we don't have as many threats like we've seen in the past, right? Like in the past, in caveman days, right, we'd have to be worried about someone coming in and doing something to us that could sacrifice our ability to feed our families or give us bodily injury. So these are old developed systems in our brains, and they still get activated even when things aren't actually threatening. So, for instance, anxiety, when we think of the amygdala, I think about anxiety, right? So if the brain were a house, the amygdala would be like our smoke detector, right? So when I'm cooking or burning popcorn, the smoke detector is going to go off. It's also going to go off if there's a full-blown fire. And I won't know the difference until I'm able to actually stop and observe what's going on. So we have to ask ourselves, as our amygdala is going off, is this a true emergency or is this just burnt popcorn? And one of the ways we get the ability to discern is this an emergency or not is by calming our nervous system, calming our amygdala, so that we can actually access the logic and reason that tells us what something is, if it's safe, if it's not safe. So self-soothing doesn't always have to be something we utilize it's not always an emergency situation that causes us to need these self-soothing mechanisms. But what we know is anytime something has made us feel unsure, uncomfortable, or unsafe, our amygdala really activates. And so we do need to engage in these self-soothing behaviors. Some examples of self-soothing behaviors are these grounding exercises that we'll talk about, regulating our nervous system. And we're actually going to talk a little bit about some not so healthy ways of self-soothing that we develop early on. So just to sort of reiterate the difference again, self-care is maintenance. It happens before there's an actual problem. It's what we do in our day-to-day. Whereas self-soothing is what we engage after there's a problem, and it helps us to deal with situations that are really uncomfortable. One of the ways that we self-soothe is through grounding exercises. And grounding doesn't always have to be the actual ground, though that is a really helpful way for us to get connected to what's around us. But grounding is anything we do that helps us focus on an aspect of the physical world instead of being caught in our brains, in our thoughts and feelings. There's two things that we really want to keep in mind when it comes to these grounding practices. One is we want to practice them. So what typically happens is I share some grounding exercises with folks. They print them out and put them away in some folder. And then as soon as a really big event is happening where they need to calm their nervous system, they try to use them. And what do you think happens? They don't work. And part of that is because we aren't used to using them and we don't know which ones actually work for us. So you'll have a whole list of grounding exercises that you can get on our website. Practicing them ahead of time helps us get used to using them when we are in crisis. The way I like to think about this is the brain as a muscle, right? So you don't show up on race day to run a marathon. You don't lift 300 pounds on the first day you've ever lifted weights. You have to build up to those things. We have to train in these physical aspects just like we train in these mental aspects. So what are our favorite techniques to use? For me, I like to move my body. So I will stand up if I'm able to and shake my body out, move my hands, put on something to listen to that really gets me activated, and just let my body move. If I'm really activated, I'll put an ice cube in my hand and watch it melt. This is great to do with little ones also. It teaches us not only how to feel a different physical sensation, but have enough patience to breathe through the period of when it melts. Our intern Nina talks about using all of her senses, which we'll talk about a little more when we talk about the soothing boxes. But just looking around the room and noticing is a really good way to get back into our bodies and into the present moment. She also likes to look at maps when she's stressed out. So maps give us something intricate and detailed to look at. Again, it's all in the noticing and the being present. Jordan, our yoga and movement teacher, she's up in New Jersey, but she's able to work with people virtually. She talks about being outside, being able to touch the ground and noticing all of the characteristics of it. Temperature, sensation, texture, etc. And then she imagines those characteristics filling up her body. So that's another way really to stay present with the moment. There are so many grounding techniques, and so your job is really just to try them out and see what works best for you. I'll list some on our website that you can utilize for free, and you can figure out what's going to be the thing that helps you in moments of activation. As a trauma specialist and an EMDR practitioner, I like to share a couple of techniques that we use in the EMDR training in order to help us ground. These are things that you can do pretty discreetly in some cases and not so discreetly in others. So I'll offer a couple just to try out. So one is called square breathing. You're probably familiar with this, but the idea is imagining a square or having a square in front of you. So if you want to look at the presentation, imagining on each side of the square, we're going to either breathe in for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, breathe out for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, and then do it over again. So that as you're breathing, you're imagining yourself going around the square. You can do this in a couple different ways just by looking at it. You can draw it on a sheet of paper, or if you have something that's square shaped, you can trace around it with your fingers. The next thing is called the butterfly hug. So you're going to loop your fingers together just like this. Make a little bird here, but this is our butterfly. And right under your collarbones, there are some kind of soft areas. So very slowly, you want to just alternate pressing into those small areas. The key is to do this nice and slowly. So if you want to follow the speed here. And as you do that, you'll feel your breath start to slow. Your heart rate start to slow. And this is because of what's called bilateral stimulation. So what they've found is that stimulating alternate sides of the body helps to reduce our nervous system response. Another way you can do this is, I think about when people are really nervous or anxious, they'll tap their leg really fast. Anytime we actually increase that bilateral stimulation, it's going to activate us. So that's just a tip if you do struggle with anxiety or fear, just to slow it down and really focus on the sensation you're feeling. And what you can do is just alternate your legs. You can even do something as simple as alternating thumbs like this, but kind of that like walking in place very slowly is another thing you can do. If you're able to get up and move around, walking slowly is a great way to do this. And it's a great way to, again, de-escalate that nervous system response. So here is the moment we've all been waiting for. In order to start creating our soothing station, all you'll need is some sort of container. So here we have our Little Seed Counseling Soothing Station box, which if you sign up for our mailing list, you have a chance at winning a box full of goodies from us. And if you don't have a box like that, a shoebox will do, even a plastic bag, something just to contain some items for you. Feeling our feelings is really hard. I can think about years and years ago when I started with my therapist, and we talked about this process of how it's hard for us to navigate big emotions by ourselves, especially as little people. So, whether you had parents who were never taught how to do this, so they couldn't teach you, or you had parents who were emotionally unavailable and not willing to do this with you, not comfortable with your feelings, there's a high likelihood that many of us didn't learn how to navigate feelings. So today, as a result, because feeling big feelings was so overwhelming, we start to avoid those feelings because they're scary and they're intimidating and we don't know the first thing to do with them. What I hope you get out of today is that we can learn ways to comfort ourselves while allowing ourselves to feel and process those emotions. There's this concept of dissociation, which means that we are not able to ground in our bodies as we're feeling strong feelings. And this is a coping mechanism that is subconscious, that is our brain's way of protecting us from things that are unimaginable. And for a lot of people with trauma, this is something that happens pretty chronically. So I just remember having this conversation with my therapist about how, of course, I don't want to feel certain feelings because when I'm doing it, I'm almost like white knuckling it and kind of powering through instead of actually offering myself that comfort and safety that I need and that compassion that I need as I do this. So here's sort of an outline of feelings work. This is what we do in therapy. The first piece is identifying feelings. So for many of us, that's actually a super foreign concept, although it sounds really simple. A lot of the ways that we identify feelings is through noticing sensations in our bodies. So if we are turned off, if we can't access those feelings in our bodies for whatever reason, it's really hard for us to develop a language for what it is that we're experiencing. So identifying our feelings is what we call building emotional literacy. So it's how we share, how we talk about our feelings, how we identify that they're happening so that we can actually do something with them. The second is feeling our feelings safely. So like we just said, we want to stay in our bodies. We want to engage our senses to be in the present moment and not catapulted back into the past when things were much, much harder. And once we can do that, we start to understand the needs that are behind the feelings. So what is it that, and maybe not necessarily behind the feelings, it can be, but also the need that is, that comes as a result of those feelings. So for instance, when I feel really angry, I know now that that's telling me something in my world is unacceptable. And so what I need to do is likely set a boundary with whoever's treating me that way. And then we can find some ways to get our needs met in a healthy way. So in the past, when I was angry, I may have yelled at someone or stewed on it. Now the healthy way to get that need met is to connect with people or to set that boundary myself. So this process of exploration is really important and can be really life-changing, even though it seems very simple. So I want to just briefly go through some of these items in the soothing station to give you some ideas of what to include in yours. So when we look at the see sense, that visual sense, I like to include pictures of people who make me feel like the person I want to be. So for some people, they might immediately think of family as being comfort. But if there's some people in that picture who have made you feel less than, you may not want to include it. So we want to put pictures of people and places that really make us feel loved, comforted, and supported. You can do this in the physical box, or you might even create a photo album on your phone that you can access when you need it. Another thing, I include cool artwork. So I have these really neat postcards, and what I love about them is not only are they pretty interesting and look cool, but they're also brightly colored with lots of details. So if I were pretty activated, I could sit and look at this picture and look for all of those colors and pay attention to the lines and the way that it's drawn. So I include a couple of these in there. Puzzles are really helpful, so anything that helps us engage our brain is helpful. I also include books. So this book actually has great quotes from women I really admire, but it's also got some really cool artwork, brightly colored, cool artwork. So it's another thing for me to really focus my attention on and engage multiple senses. Another thing I use, and I use this with lots of my clients, so this is a feelings wheel. This is actually a magnet, which is really neat, and you'll get one if you win the Soothing Station box. But this helps us put words to our feelings in a way that is succinct, and it's broken down by feeling, and then it kind of graduates in intensity. So that's a good thing for us to look at. Anything brightly colored, fun, we want to throw in there. I really like to utilize things that engage multiple senses at a time. So, for instance, this fidget spinner right here, you can see it, you can touch it, you can hear not only it spinning, but the pop of these little, what are they called? Poppets. That's what they're called. So this one really engages multiple things here. Another thing for hearing, a sound machine. So if you like the sound of white noise, that's great. Any playlists, maybe on Spotify or Apple Music, can be useful. You may create some for different feelings too. Like you may create a playlist for when you're sad that activates you. You might create a playlist for when you're activated that helps you calm down. You may create a playlist of things that remind you of fond memories. All of those things are super helpful. A singing bowl is another thing that you can put in there. They make really small ones like this or even smaller that you can get on Amazon or at some local stores. What's neat about these is that depending on how you utilize it, so with or without the padding, which side of the mallet you use, different sounds can be created just from one object. It's also absolutely beautiful, so kind of spending some time touching. You've got the artwork in the middle. You can feel it. You can feel the weight of it. It's really engaging. Smells. So if you have a cologne or perfume that reminds you of a person that feels really supportive and loving, that's a great one. But smell is actually one of our most powerful senses when it comes to trauma. It can work positively for us and connect us with people that are safe and supportive. It can also do the opposite and be very triggering for folks. So we want to be careful what smells we use. I typically do a couple things. So I'll put a candle in there that I like that makes me feel calm. I'll put some essential oils. So this is lavender. Lotions are good too, especially smelly lotions, because they activate that sense of touch and comfort because it's that safe self-touch. And also you can smell it. And things like lip smackers. So I remember getting these for Christmas as a kid and loving them. Not only are they brightly colored, but they have nice scents and flavors. So you can not only smell it and see it, you can feel it, and you can taste it. And so taste is that last one. You know, of course, there's other things. Silly putty for touch. There's poppets for touch. I even like these little spongy things that my kiddo uses. But all sorts of things that really activate those senses. And then for taste, what we know is that one of our most primitive ways of self-soothing, especially as a baby, is through sucking. And so you think about a breastfed baby, of course, that's how they get sustenance. But even a bottle fed baby, they're getting sustenance there. sucking their thumb, sucking on a pacifier. So lollipops are a good way to activate this. And you've got different flavors, so sweet flavors, salty flavors, etc. You can find different lollipops to help you engage, where you can utilize a bunch of those senses at the same time. A couple of other things I put in there, I always put a notebook and a pen in there, because for me, externalizing my feelings through writing is a really helpful tool. So I like to have all of those things in one place. If you're a person that's prone to suicidal ideation or has really rough days, you might put your safety plan that you develop with your therapist in here right on the top. Call this person, here's some emergency lines, here's what you can do to pass the time, etc. All of these things are ways to really help take care of ourselves in these moments. So I hope that you have a lot of ideas for what you can include in your self-soothing kit that you can keep at home. Again, you don't have to have this big box that you carry around everywhere. You can put some things that engage the senses right on your phone to take with you for when you need it. If you need some more examples, please visit our website. You can sign up and get resources, free resources like these. I'm also going to list a resource that talks about what sensations happen in the body when we feel certain feelings and what needs they might produce, just so you have that. And of course, if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to one of us. My email is Jenna, Jena, at littleseedcounseling.com. And also our intern Nina is available to answer questions. She's Nina at littleseedcounseling.com. Nina is also offering reduced cost or even free therapy to those who need it and who qualify. So if you're looking for some help through the holiday season, or if you want to get motivated for the new year, please sign up to work with her online. There's more about our clinical intern program and how we help give back to not only aspiring clinicians, but also the community.